Okay, you want to hear a fun fact? During COVID, I was one of the guys that
Oh, really?
gave it all up. Because of San Francisco, you couldn't do anything. And so I traveled for a while. But in general, for work, I travel almost weekly.
Oh, I didn't.
Almost
really?
weekly.
Wow, I didn't realize that.
And traveling is one of those things where it's good until something goes wrong.
Correct.
And then it's very bad.
It's just like you're powerless.
But don't you think that's like a kind of a metaphor for a lot of things in life?
100%. 100%. I think the number of things that we basically take for granted with respect to just how our life functions, that's always like remarkable. And the way I remind myself of that when I feel like whatever bad about something, like there's no bottom to low.
What do you mean?
You think you feel low? There's like, things can be a lot worse, like in any situation.
Do you mean comparatively or for you specifically?
For anyone. Because we rest on top of so many things working right. Everything from our health to our family, our friends, our home, our work.
Right.
And so you're like, terrible day, like horrible things happen.
Right.
Like, no.
Right. It's
like there's
that's an interesting point. It's almost like when you're traveling and you have a plane delay, at that point, you just can't imagine anything worse.
Correct.
However, when you're sick in bed, all you would want is a plane delay.
100%.
And then when you're, like when a family member gets diagnosed with a real sickness, you would trade anything to
just make that go.
Just be sick in bed.
100%. So that's what I mean by it just like keeps.
But how do you? And then obviously, like in the work setting, it's pretty much the same thing, 100%. Right? Like when you have an outage, breach, whatever it is, there's always a thing.
It's very hard to deal with.
How do you, like, if you know that, if we instinctively know that to be the case, that there is always something worse, why do we still get so wrapped around the axle when it happens?
I mean, I think different people handle it differently.
Do you?
And I try to be very even about a lot of things, and I think also recognizing that some things I've been through lots of outages, like where systems are down, like you're using tremendous amounts of money. It's a crisis. You almost have to like pace yourself. Might be hours, might be days, sometimes like for big problems, it can be weeks. And so there's just like, you need to have a certain attitude of, okay, I know what to do and I won't get it, I won't let it like get me to that point of like ultra high stress where you're honestly not that effective. To me, that's a thing you can learn and you can teach yourself that also. But there are some things that, there are basically like axes of problems that I still find very hard to deal with. Like if there's a unexpected big like personnel change, like someone that and trust like wants out, I find that very personal and difficult
no matter
to
how
deal
many
with.
times
Like how many times I've done it. It's just like that's like there's some things that are.
Why do you think that
are
is?
A little bit more grinding. I don't know. Because it's wrapped up in a relationship. It's wrapped up in like it's to a certain extent. It's almost like sometimes it's a situation. I find it very hard even when I have to go tell someone, like especially if I hired someone that they're not a good fit for their position and they should do something else. It's like you're giving up on the trust that you placed. So I think like that I still find very hard to do. But work problems, like, okay, this is the situation. These are the things that we can do and should do. And like, let's go take care of things with the right level of urgency. Doesn't mean you're any less intense, but you're more like, I am in charge of the situation. The more things you can, get to that bucket, the sort of easier it is to navigate changes big and small.
Last night, I woke up in a absolute frenzy. It was a dream. Some might call it a nightmare, but it was work related. Mm-hmm. I'm in the middle of like a very intense negotiation right now between a candidate to be the president of one of our most important portfolio companies. And it's been dragging on for a very long time. Yeah. And we are in the bottom of the ninth, 2 outs. And it's going to happen, today or tomorrow, it's going to happen or it's not. And I'm in the middle of this thing. And, it has basically, going back to our earlier conversation of there's always something worse. In this case, it seeped into my subconscious and literally woke me up. Yep. And when that happened, I couldn't go back to sleep. Like my brain just started the engine. And there was no unrevving that thing. Do you experience that? Or have you gone through so much of the ups and downs at this point that your idea of relativism is very different than maybe mine?
All of us deal with that kind of intense situation, intense stress. But to me, it's also important that we teach ourselves what it takes to decouple. So I've started meditating for the past couple of years, more to be like, okay, I need to be centered. I just need to, sometimes it's useful to, list here are the things I need to do, things I am taking care of. But you know that you're taking care of them. There's nothing that you can do at this point in time. And so centering yourself, I often find it to be useful for saying, okay, now I can go to sleep. But I think whatever my physical being is also that generally sleep is a way for me to de-stress. While with other people, my wife, if she's stressed, she can't sleep. Mm-hmm. And so I think there is that variation also. But on the other hand, if I get up because something is intense, it made my brain wake up and I can't sleep, there's a part of me that just goes like, it's okay, just accept it. Mm-hmm. This too shall pass. Mm-hmm. That's sort of how I find my peace on both ends. One, it's like, how do you reset before you try to sleep? But then after that, if if you don't get sleep, I tell my mom this, right? She sometimes tries to sleep, and I tell her trying to sleep is almost the worst thing you can want to do because it's very slippery. Yeah. It just goes away. Yeah. And so part of me just goes it's all good. I'll get up. I'll get through the day. The end of the day will come soon enough. And
do you have kids?
Fine. I have 2 children. They're 25 and 23.
And do your kids remind you of you or no?
I just don't think about them that way. I want them to be their people. And so it's almost I think one good thing that my wife and I did as parents was we very explicitly never ever compared our children.
To each other.
To each other. So just not, or to others. We're you should shoot to be very good at what you do. You should shoot to be absolutely good. We don't, because they were different, we don't need to compare you with each other. So similarly, I never frame my children in terms of what I am. First, it's a burden. I don't really want them to have it.
Meaning your career, your profession.
Yeah, yep. Exactly. It's no one needs that. I'm kind of you be you. And so it's just and over the years, I've basically taught myself to never be in that kind of comparison. And sometimes, people will even say things like, who's the tallest among you? It's dumb, right? But if people see the 3 of us, they'll ask. And I always prefer to end those conversations with both my children are a little bit taller than me. It's fine.
So even something big like careers and work or small like height.
Yeah.
You
be you. It's fine. You're great.
Is there a comparison thing? What about the comparison?
it's what about the comparison? I think it's a little bit more of, I would rather have the tone between us be much more about how, do we help each other and collaborate rather than needing to compete with each other. I mean, comparisons are okay if they're done abstractly, but comparisons inevitably get framed as like win-lose within a group. I think I just prefer this approach of like, how do we help, at least within a small nuclear group, how do we help each other? How do we support each other rather than, drawing some artificial who's better?
And isn't it, like, even before being the CEO of Snowflake, when you were at Google, I mean, you were, a big deal at Google. I guess, isn't it kind of unavoidable? Like this idea of other kids or parents telling their kids things or your kids about, oh, it's, your dad or Sridhar or whatever. Like, it is
unavoidable, but it doesn't have to come from you. It can be that like, hey, I'm here to support you. You should be, you should try really hard at the things that you aspire to. And I was also firm with my children around things like, passion versus profession. I'm not one of these people that is going to recommend that people follow their passions. I'm kind of like, that's nonsense. Follow passions where you're good, and at least for your profession, things that society values. There are lots of things that we can do that we might even be good at that society totally does not value, and that ends up having a lot of impact on our lives. And so, for example, give you a very simple thing. I always tell people, I told my children this, if you think you want to pursue a career in math, please make sure you're a genius, because turns out most smart people on the planet have worked on math for the last 2,000 years. You better be damn special for you to think that you're going to make a difference to the field. Go work in new nascent things where there's lots of stuff to be discovered, where there's lots of value being created. I mean, think about it. Up until about 10 years ago, no one in their right mind should have worked on cars like afresh, unless like if you wanted to be an entrepreneur. It was just a very difficult field. It's only that like EV has changed all of these things. So there are, to me, it is important that people combine their passion with the things that they are good at, and that would sort of be my advice to sort of my kids, and that's sort of how I encourage them to go forward. It turns out, they did pick software engineering, both of them, but I've been perfectly fine if they had picked like any other field that they cared about, but also one that supported their aspirations overall.
But if you tell kids to pick the intersection of passion and proficiency, won't most of them these days just say video games? Like
no,
isn't the discovery process of passion very difficult as an adolescent?
I mean, but it's easy if you're playing video games. Like the number of people, it's easy to tell them to look up stuff like, okay, how many people are actually making a successful livelihood playing video games? It's a very head-heavy thing. This is my problem sometimes with being an influencer. It's like, it's only the top. It's like wanting to be Steph Curry. Mm-hmm. Sorry, there's only one Steph. And so that's sort of what I mean by, are you picking things that you're passionate about that also set up the odds right for modest success, let's call it a middle-class living, and also extraordinary success? Like, what's that right combination?
And going back to the idea of you comparing kind of like the career or bringing that up around the kids, what would be, I'm trying to think of an example of what would be I guess I would think it's kind of weird to rub it in like, oh, guess what? I'm the CEO of Snowflake or whatever. Like, how would you do it? What are you trying to avoid? Does that make sense? When you say you don't want to compare your career to theirs, you don't want to make them feel any less than because you have a very successful career. What's the alternative? Like, how would that manifest in another way? Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't think most parents would want to come home and flaunt their career to their children.
Of course.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
I totally get that.
Yeah. And so when you say like, I'm intentional about not being comparative about my work with them, what does that mean?
It means, for example, taking an active interest in what progress means for them, understanding the nuances of what does it take to get promoted from an IC1 to an IC2. And it's saying, that's not easy. It's still hard. Or my older son started a company and we talk about what defines success in the first month, the first 3 months, what defines glorious success, what defines middling success, what defines failure. And so it's a lot of you engage with them at the things that matter to them. Remember, a lot of people lose their ability to sort of engage at a different person. So it's very hard for us to understand, truly another profession. And when certainly we talk about lots of topics that are in the mutual intersection of the areas that we care about. But to me, it's engaging in the things that they would care about, engaging in things like what courses were they taking when they were in college, what choices were they making, when they were in high school, and kind of being a part of the journey. One of my happiest memories from, when the kids were growing up was when my younger son said he wanted to do a geometry course in the summer. It's weird, but he's like, hey, I feel I am behind in math and I want to catch up this summer. It was a little bit of a crazy course. There was 4 hours of classes and 4 hours of homework every day. He was like, this is what I want to do. And I would sit with him at least a couple of hours every evening, just working through his problems and being a part of that. It's engaging with your children in ways that are meaningful to you, all with the thread of hard work matters. It produces good outcomes.
Do you, we were saying you're going to this Morgan Stanley conference tonight. I'm sure all the other people at the Morgan Stanley conference are all very well-to-do, successful people. Do you have is there an observation that, especially as you become more successful, and you have a peer set of people that are all at the tops of their game, it becomes more difficult to actually find that relatability, to actually think about people outside of yourself?
I think it's hard. I think it's something that you have to consciously do a lot of listening on. One of the things that worries me, it's like a constant worry. One of the things that I care about at a Snowflake or a Google was if you're running a team of many thousand people, you honestly have no idea about what it is like to actually be doing the work, to be an entry-level engineer, what that experience is like. To me, I think having that kind of empathy for what other people in your company experience, to make sure that feedback is coming back to you, that there's appropriate amount of support for making people thrive. I think it's a very conscious thing you have to develop, but ultimately, in my mind, that's also what it takes for one to be a good leader. Yes, I meet lots of customers, but part of what I also enjoy is getting to spend time with our sales engineers, with our sales leaders. Sometimes senior ones as we're going from customer to customer, but also the SE that's actually in the account. Hear from them about what's our education, what's our enablement like, how does our product portfolio resonate or not? What's the gap? To me, that's an important part of every leader's job.
Yeah, the way that I define it is, can you dolphin, like a dolphin going up and down in the water? And it's actually, when I interview executives, it's the only thing that I'm testing for, is can you be at 10,000 feet at an executive level with CEOs and founders or with your peers, And then can you be at 1,000 feet and be down in the details with the team, which then rebuilds.
And then can you translate that back?
Exactly, which then rebuilds the context that you need to be more effective at the executive level. 100%. In many ways, you actually can't have the right level of context at the executive level without going into
100%.
Into the weeds to go pull that out.
100%. I think it's that balance that is very, that can be tricky because there's an infinity of detail that you can get drowned by. But on the other hand, if you don't sample enough detail and have effective mechanisms to have the entire org do that, and you also doing that, you become more and more disconnected with like reality. And so I call it a lot of like, yes, you need the high level strategy, you need to be able to enunciate it, but you also need to make sure that you and your team are able to execute. And I think being informed is very important. One of the really tough lessons that I learned as an SVP at Google was that most of my opinions about how people perceived Google or used Google products were just wrong.
Really?
And what we discovered when we did large-scale surveys was just very, very different from all of our intuitions. That's because we all lived 5 miles from Mountain View and had been with Google for 15 years and were exceptionally wealthy. And it's just like, that's not the reality of like Google users in the world. To me, that was like an aha moment. You need to have hate to use the word, but you need to have like a process for even discovering what it is that your users at scale, Google obviously runs at a bigger scale in terms of the people that it touches than Snowflake, but even the process of figuring out what questions to ask and how do you get scaled feedback that can inform you, it's a very eye-opening process.
Was there something that strikes you as you being very wrong about?
Specifically about something, in general about something?
Like at Google while you were there, something that you were quite certain about a decision or the world being its specific way, you and your peers maybe, and as you peeled back the layers of the onion, it just wasn't right.
I mean, I would say like Neeva, for example, was a humbling exercise.
The startup after
Google
yeah.
was a humbling exercise in how your beliefs can be wrong, and how even the process of sampling can become or getting scaled feedback can get very, very tricky. There's a reason we struggle with things like opinion polls for politics and so on. Neeva was started with the thesis that people got enough value from their search experience that they would take conscious actions to go after a new way of thinking about search. So we did a lot of surveys, we collected a lot of data. But the fact of the matter is, while people say they care about privacy, their willingness to actually take a set of actions to protect it, generally very small. It's a little bit like, you can think of it as being analogous to dieting. All of us say we want to eat healthy. Some of us do, most of us don't. And so that's when you realize like, wow, there's a big difference between what a set of people might believe, but their ability to take actions on that belief. This is almost like, next level. It's not, so scale feedback doesn't tell you. So you have to be very careful in how you tease things, even with scale feedback sometimes.
How big was your org before you left Google?
I think it was about 10,000 plus, 10,500 people. So it was a large org.
How, and you'd spent basically most of your entire career at Google?
I spent 10 years elsewhere, both doing research to get my PhD and 5 years in research labs.
Yeah.
So I was already 30 by the time I joined Google.
How humbling was it? Like after, there's many accounts of you during your days at Google, and your rise is incredible. Your work is will go down in the history books there. You were the guy in many respects doing very important work and were super well respected. And I can't imagine that everybody the entire time was just saying nothing but effusive things about you. You know, you have a 10,000 person team at a place like Google. I don't know, it's just a big job with a lot of responsibility, and it's good, it's cushy. There's a lot of positive reinforcement from the 10,000 people underneath you telling you you're doing good work.
I love that team.
The compensation was good. Everything was so good, right? How, maybe, what did it feel like to then go from that, right? Like that, I imagine it was a humbling experience.
Very humbling experience.
To then take all of these learnings and observations from the search world, go build a search startup, get a bunch of funding. Probably there was all sorts of hype around it at the time. I remember, we invested in the B2B version of it with Glean.
Invested in Glean. That's right.
And I remember even then, a lot of people thought Neeva was the winner. B2B search, gosh, we've been trying to do that for 20 years. That's right. And I don't know, I imagine that must have been, I don't know, you tell me. Like that's just...
It's resets are very humbling. And there's just no two ways about it. They're very awkward. For any number of reasons. One, like the day-to-day impact that you can have, obviously is dramatically different. People will say these things, but it's hard to internalize how difficult it is to make a startup happen. I think it's almost like it's like having a baby. It's better that you don't know how difficult it is. You just would not almost do it otherwise. I also felt partway into Neeva, maybe after the going got really tough, that I had also discarded many of the skills and strengths that I had when I was doing my job at Google. It became doing a startup. It's almost like, one small part of my brain was getting used to do it. All of the context I had built around large-scale systems or teams or, complicated like product, legal kind of issues, partnership issues, all of them became completely irrelevant because you're trying to do this new, isolated, small thing. But you also discover yourself. I would say I learned to do just many awkward things that I would never have learned at Google, whether it is marketing or relentlessly like pitching your product, the vision. So I think, like a startup absolutely forces you to get better along a whole set of new axes. But as I said, I also felt that in a weird way, I had changed too much in the transition from Google over to the startup. And in fact, I've now, I now have like a theory of change for professions. Basically, lots of people want change in their careers, especially the successful ones. Like if you're a VP, made good money, done this, you're a successful GP, you're like, hey, I want to do something else. And again, sometimes we are driven by, that sounds really interesting. But to me, especially after we grow older, like we learn important skills along the way. I mean, let's face it, it's only after 9, 10 that we actually seriously start learning and getting better at things, right? And so, we learn particular industries. We learn particular skills, often painfully from other people. Like being a VC, I think very much as, it's an apprenticeship. You learn by watching other great people. It takes a lot of time. To me, I think when people think about change, they need to, I tell people, you should make a list of really like hard skills that you have. You should be truthful with yourself about what is it that you know that you're really good at. And for the next thing that you pick, you just need to make sure that, many of these, not all, but many of these are like things that you can carry over. Because people underestimate what it is to go through like a complete reset. It's like, you or me saying today, I want to be a brain surgeon. Yes, but you're sort of giving up all of the things you're good at and saying, I'm going to start on this 10-year journey to get better at something else. And I think people like really deeply underestimate sort of how, vulnerable and naked you are if you just give up everything that you're great at and sort of start over. And so generally my advice to people is like, yes, make that list and make sure that at least a chunk of them are applicable and you're passionate about the new area. Because just again, passion without anything else to support you, especially as a grown, successful adult, is very daunting.
What was the hardest thing to transition and pick up again from SVP, 10,000 person manager at Google to Sridhar and his co-founders?
I mean, just the transition over to the startup.
Like what skills, like actual day-to-day type work was the most jarring for you? After making that transition, having been at Google for as long as you were, like the skills that you were talking about. Yeah. What did you feel that you were really lacking in the day-to-day that you're like, man, this is a pretty steep learning curve?
I mean, first of all, initially, actually, Neeva started out as a B2B startup similar to Glean. And so we quickly had to learn things like, what does it take to pitch to CIOs? What motivates them? Who is the economic buyer?
Right, because you're coming from like a B2C world.
It's a whole new thing. I mean, ads is a little bit of a B2B world in that it had important customers. You had to appeal to them, but still it's very different selling to like enterprise CIOs. And so that whole process of, and you're a junior PM when you start, or you're a PM when you start, because you're talking to people, gathering feedback, having that influence the product. That's a big change. And then things like planning your early cap table very carefully. Because with a startup, you have a limited amount of even equity to give. And so, when you want to hire great engineers, for example, it's just like they're also doing their own calculations around what's the risk, what's the reward, coming up with a plan, which I did with my co-founder Vivek. With that, how do you go about hiring people to a startup? Startups are very, very different from hiring for a Google. And so you need like new ways of thinking, new skills. So for example, we came to the conclusion, kind of weird, but we were like, people that are in their 30s, just gotten married or just had kids, generally bad idea to pitch Neeva to them because our success rate was just like really low. It's almost like you want somebody that's been successful, you can then say like, here, take a big hit. Or you want people out of college. You're like, yes, I want a startup in which things can go very rapidly. They're like things that you discover, obviously by yourself and by talking to other friends that have done this. And then the other thing, like initially, especially, building products is slow, especially if you want to build an enterprise product that needs to be secure. Our first customer for the B2B product that we built was Bill Coden from Sequoia. He's like, that's fine. You can index my all of my work data. By the way, there's a whole bunch of confidential information about public companies. Don't screw it up. Like no pressure. And it's like learning to build things like that from scratch. These are all like, tough early experiences for the first 6 to 9 months. How do you set the cadence and execution of your team? Yes, it's a small team, but you need to predictably drive progress, how to have the right sense of urgency. These are all like hard things that we had to learn.
Can I ask you maybe one more layer beneath this? does it make you, and you don't have to, maybe you give me the politically correct answer, but like, let's just say, because obviously I know Glean really well, seeing Glean, does it make you happy or frustrated that they're now off into the races? Like, meaning your hypothesis was right.
I'm very happy for
that. Like in fact, in many ways, it was the market that you picked, the ways that you were, like, all the things that you thought were right. Does that make it sting less or more? You know?
Like, look, by the
way, you ended up becoming the CEO of Snowflake, so it's fine.
Arvind is a friend, and I'm very happy for him. I'm very happy for Glean. So it's like, look, it's important to be gracious about stuff like this. And more than any, and like many people, perhaps more so, I'm very conscious of how path-dependent success is. Perplexity is very successful. And I'm happy for them as well.
Right.
And so, it's easy to get frustrated and negative about all kinds of things. But honestly, I feel very lucky to be in an environment where you can take big, bold bets, where, yes, some of them will not be as successful as you would like them to be. But we are a culture that learns, that adapts, and that offers, other options. And so, after Neeva came the Snowflake acquisition. That happened because the combination of search and AI that we had pioneered was something that, Christian, Benoit, Thierry, and Frank felt was going to be critical for Snowflake's success. And so, and that produced this opportunity.
Totally.
And Vivek is doing exceptionally well as the head of AI at Snowflake. I think we have to, is Neeva the outcome that I wanted? I mean, did Neeva have the outcome I wanted? Absolutely not, but it's okay.
But then you became the CEO of Snowflake.
I became the CEO of Snowflake.
It's like, there's some proverb, and I'm going to butcher it, but it's don't judge the day until it's over.
That's correct. Or when one door closes, another door opens. So I'm especially thrilled about my current job in the sense that it's like a culmination of kind of lots of things I've done in my life. I worked in databases for my PhD research.
in databases?
PhD in database research. I did query processing work at Bell Labs. We wrote a paper on approximate query answering and early clustering papers. And among the teams that I am proudest of at Google was the data infrastructure team. We pioneered many things like stream processing. We were the first client on Spanner, which is the distributed database that replicated object store that Snowflake built. We built a query engine called F1 SQL that was like a harbinger of things like Snowflake to come. We did this in 2009. And so, in some ways to be at like a data infrastructure company is also doubly magical. So I'm very happy here.
When did the thought first come to your mind? Like, are these guys, do they want me to run Snowflake? Like, that must have just been, especially toiling away, B2B, B2C. There was no way your head was, I'm going to go be the CEO of Snowflake.
100%. And when the acquisition talks, were going on with a few companies, including Snowflake, I can honestly assure you that I had two things that I was genuinely concerned about. One was we had a set of employees at Neeva that had these weird things called recourse loans. If people want to early exercise stock in a startup, basically we came up with it's a perfectly legit maneuver by which Neeva would loan somebody money, and they would turn around and buy stock. It's a cashless transaction.
It's a taxable event.
If the loan is forgiven. Honestly, towards the end, I was terrified of stuff like, hey, we are not going to make enough money to be able to, off the transaction, to be able to just like forgive the loans and gross up the taxes. Returning investor money was also a point of pride for me. I was like, hey, these people bet on us, bet on me. So there was one part that was just like, we need to get through that. I was also very concerned that a set of amazing people, most of whom are at Snowflake now, had spent 4 years toiling away at Neeva, giving up on often multi-million-dollar packages that they could easily have pulled per year at a Google or other places, and so making sure that they were well taken care of. Those were
at a good home.
At a good home.
Yeah.
Those are my 3 goals. Like, pay back the investors, make sure that Neeva employees didn't get into dumb financial trouble, and the third was do right by them for the future. And so when we came in, I think we handled the acquisition well. I joke to people that I've been part of many terrible acquisitions that Google did in terms of just mistakes in alignment. And so we set up the team to succeed. We shut down the consumer product. We said our future is going to be tied to the future of Snowflake. We were very collaborative about how we approach teams here. I told teams very openly, we are happy to run with projects ourselves. We are happy to simply offer advice if that's what you want, if we have areas of expertise. Or we can also contribute people to your projects if you think that that's the right way to do it. And so we approach the integration the right way. And a lot of my early time was, let's get things going, let's show progress, and let's set Snowflake on the path to also being really great in AI, which is seen as a transformational technology for data. That was pretty much like the things that occupied my brain for the first few months at Snowflake. And then there were a series of conversations, with board members, with Frank. I spent a week with him in Europe. Frank is a legend. At some point, I was like, Frank, can I hang out with you for a week? And he said, sure. And so we did 2 Snowflake conferences together. I was with him from dawn to dusk, from 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. every day for a week. And that's when we had earnest conversations about whether there was a there. Because my original deal with Frank was that I would stay for 6 months and then I would exit stage left, and to figure out what I would do. When we started having conversations about, is there a future here?
So you're saying I actually believe you. You're saying it wasn't acquire Neeva so that Sridhar can be the CEO of this company.
No, it was.
In fact, what you're saying kind of the opposite.
Yeah, it's the opposite. At least it was acquire Neeva so that we are able
get great talent,
credible. It's talent plus leaders. Yeah. Snowflake famously hired a couple of other people to be in charge of things like ML. They didn't work out. Part of the value that I brought to the table, Vivek brought to the table, was we understand org dynamics. We understand what it takes. Nobody report, but I tell people, I was minister without a portfolio at Snowflake. I was an SVP of AI with 0 people reporting to me. None. It's go make AI happen.
And the funny thing is your skill is having people reporting to you, going back to your competencies for Google.
And so 0. But how do you shape a company to care about something, but again, in a positive way? You have to, when you're dealing with this, I learned this the hard way. I, screwed up some teams that I took over running, but I learned very quickly that there's an art to being part of a team. You have to acknowledge what they're great at. You have to tactfully, but clearly point out things that we could be doing better. And so we also, we approach Snowflake with a very collaborative attitude of, we're here to make you succeed in whatever way we can. But yeah, In many ways, I think it was like a big test for Frank whether I could get the organization to do things
with no reporting
no
structure.
Reports.
Right.
To me, that proves like, you have to prove yourself with
influence without authority.
With like it's the moral authority. It's the power of your ideas. I think it was honestly, it was a fun experience. I also dove into it, traveled everywhere, did like one crazy trip here to New York, to Auckland, New Zealand, to Singapore, to Bengaluru, to back to San Francisco, just doing events, meeting customers. So I learned a lot. And that was part of what made me think is like, wait, there might be a bigger future here. And
you started getting excited about it too.
I started getting excited about it also.
And I imagine this was at the point where Snowflake, like Frank is I sat with Frank in your offices. You two are very different leaders.
Yes.
Very different. And I think Frank is a legend.
That's right.
I mean, he is a legend.
Literally. Yeah.
He is a legend. But he's not a technologist in the same way that you are. He's probably not steeped in the AI world like you are. Not in the same way.
Yeah.
Especially not in search. And the combination of data and search and AI.
Yep.
Like we said, like that's kind of the crescendo of a career that you've been building towards in many ways.
Exactly.
So it's probably, again, you tell me, but just them seeing that in you maybe surprising yourself at putting these pieces together at Snowflake. And then lastly, Frank probably just, when I sat with him, I'll tell you, I saw a man that was just tired. Like that he said himself, like, there's a tax I pay every single day. I don't know how long you can pay that toll for in the way that he does. And that's why he's so great, is because he was willing to endure that tax of greatness, of demanding of himself and others something beyond. And I think he was just exhausted. So I'm sure all of those things started to happen during the 6 months. Is that fair, or am I like over dramatizing it?
I mean, look, I obviously don't see into Frank's mind, but I will give him an enormous amount of credit for telling the board that this change might be a good thing. He's a very proud person, as he should be. But he was the one, along with the board, that said, we need somebody that has like more of a steeping in technology to take Snowflake, to help Snowflake navigate this new turbulent world of AI and data and machine learning, all of them coming together. And he was gracious enough, for example, even in the call that we did with Kramer after earnings, to look at Kramer in the eye and say, like, this is the right person for Snowflake's future. Most people are just like simply not that gracious. And so I think it was a little bit of, he saw that Snowflake might be better served by somebody that had these skills, and less in terms of directly leading a sales team. I've never led a sales team directly. I've seen greats up close, like Philip Schindler and Nikesh, and so I give him a lot of credit for working with the board and making this change happen. The ultimate decision is the board's decision, as you know, but he was a part of the board. The other thing that I will say is that I don't see my job as a tax. I would say it's the opposite, at least at this point. And hopefully for years to come. I feel blessed, if anything, to be able to have the kind of impact that I have on first of all, the 7,000 plus people that work for Snowflake, but also for the 10,000 customers and easily the millions of people that we touch every day with Snowflake, the product. And so we have companies that, close their books every month on Snowflake. We have companies that have all of their active positions. These are companies that are literally trading tens of billions of dollars on Snowflake. And we are a trusted name. And so, yes, there will always be details to take care of. Some of them can be painful, but overall, I can positively say I'm truly enjoying this experience, primarily because of how much positive impact that it can drive for people that are touched by it. And I'm pretty good at boxing things and saying, okay, this is a problem to be taken care of. Yes, it can be, it can be stressful or it can be annoying. But I would say the larger picture is this is an amazing platform, and I feel very fortunate to be a part of it.
Sridhar, I recently had Mark McLaughlin on the show.
Yes.
And
I knew Mark. I was on his board at Palo Alto, and now he's on our board.
That's right.
Yes.
And well, not to get sidetracked with Mark, but what a great human being.
100%.
What an amazing
100%.
human.
Yeah.
After sitting down with Mark, I wanted more people like Mark in the Valley. Yeah. It's like he's enlightened now. But nonetheless, using the Frank and Sridhar analogy, Mark did this with Nikesh, who I'm sure you know.
I know Nikesh. I was part of the transition.
You were?
I was on the board when Nikesh came on.
At Palo Alto?
Palo Alto.
Okay, then this is perfect. So that was I don't know if controversial decision is the right word, but Nikesh couldn't have been more different than Mark. He's never been in security. He's never been a CEO before. He, the list goes on of reasons why it shouldn't have worked. And objectively, it's worked incredibly.
That's correct.
I actually think this story will be like that. I really do. But that's a brave transition to make.
That's correct.
And Frank made a brave transition. Snowflake made a brave transition.
That's right. That's right.
And I think Palo Alto did the same thing, don't you? Like when you were on the board, did you not think, oh, geez, this feels risky?
Look,
someone would probably have the board, I'm sure, felt about this transition. When you lose a legend,
I personally look for two demonstrated qualities on top of a basic high level of just intellect, ability to understand situations, people. On top of that, I look for drive, the person driven to learn things, to understand things, to change things. And is the person malleable? Will they change who they are, what they are to the situation? And Nikesh has that in spades. And if you ask me, over here, it is that sort of earnestness and drive that I bring, which is 100%. I'm not on a sales team, but I've met 200 plus customers in the past year that I've been at Snowflake. Just in the Canada trip that I did last week, I think it was something like 25 formal meetings and a bunch of more casual lunch, breakfast kind of meetings. I dive with as much energy into sort of our activity dashboards and sales comp plans as I do into what is Vivek doing with Llama 400. To me, these are the ingredients, and I pay a lot of attention to like the people behind all of these things. This is why I tell you that I really love talking to like our sales reps, our sales engineers. And so I think it is that that combination that I think hopefully is like the key ingredient for success. There are lots of decisions, lots of things to navigate, but anyone you talk to here will openly tell you, it's like, dude tries really hard, works really hard, and comes up to speed on stuff that he doesn't know.
And you do that through details. Like you're voracious for the details.
Everybody has to find their own comfort. Yes, I like managing at the high level. Here's strategy, here's objectives. But I also look for like continuous proof along the way. It can be tiring for people around me, but I'm sort of like, I want to see progress like today and tomorrow and day after. And like, how are you breaking problems down? And how do you set up basically like self-verifying systems that drive progress?
How do you manage to that level of detail? Daily, weekly progress. Are you managing to that level of detail?
There are some of it is having a culture of transparency and self-correction. I'll tell you the first thing that I did after becoming CEO was I said, I want daily emails broken down by region that come to me, like every morning before 5 a.m. that says, how did Snowflake do yesterday? And I want all of the leaders who contribute to that to get the same thing. So we're all on the same page. And sort of how do you drive that level of accountability to everybody? Like we're a consumption company. We get a scorecard every day. How did we do yesterday? Nowhere to hide. That sort of permeating. Similarly, with things like stability or product progress, you want to bring that level of accountability. Perhaps it's not daily. One of the things we did with the AI and ML teams was we said, here's a spreadsheet of the different things that we are going to get done. And there's going to be a directly responsible person. And we know that we have a bunch of product work to do to be considered world-class. This is the plan. These are the promises. We will update you. This is what I promised Frank when we sort of did early reviews on AI and ML, like in Q3 last year. That's when we started having a real plan around what to do. But it's that culture of like transparency and sort of iteration that drives progress. Or here, I have different techniques. As I said, some things are daily. I also run periodic reviews. Some are on a monthly cadence, some are on a bi-weekly cadence, some are on a quarterly cadence. But they are all about, collectively, what does progress mean? How are we tracking to it? We introduced OKRs at Snowflake for the first time, I think, starting this quarter. Again, it's like strategy, objectives. This is what the different teams are doing. This is what the product and engineering team is doing. This is what the go-to-market function, the bridge between product and sales is doing. This is what sales is doing. And that level of clarity about how we drive the company forward. Alignment is a wonderful thing. But I like to have that be accompanied by the detail, which makes it clear to everybody, like what does progress mean.
So when you wake up in the morning, what time do you wake up in the morning?
I generally start work by 5 a.m.
Actually 5?
5 a.m.
Which is why you ask for it in your inbox by 5?
Before 5.
So you wake up at 5? 4:30?
I wake up a little bit before 5, but I'm instant boot, so I can get to work.
Are you serious?
I wake up, I make my coffee, I can start working.
And you're going.
I'm going. My days tend to run a little short, so I'm like less hyperactive in the evenings and nights. But morning, I'm Like I literally wake up, walk down to make my coffee, start work.
And so the first thing you do is check the emails of how did Snowflake do yesterday? And is it one email?
There's multiple. There's one email that breaks it down by basically our
Function.
GVPs. Our GVPs. These are the people that report into Chris, our CRO.
Yep.
And so, but that's the scorecard along with an updated forecast. We have a plan, which is what we say we are going to do. And we have a forecast that computes.
And do you get that on
every day.
product too?
We get a product breakdown as well.
And now I'm just curious. Like if something on product, you get this update at 5 a.m.
Yeah.
Are people waking up to Sridhar emails at 5:30 being like, this doesn't look right?
Look, as a
like,
CEO,
how do you, can I be more specific about
please.
the question?
Yeah.
How, if you know something is off, you can just tell. How do you gracefully interrogate to get all the way to the mat? Or, do you just blow it up on the email?
It's a work in progress. My general bar, we used to have this funny alias, I thought it was funny, that I set up, I think, early at Google. We called it bean counters because we were the people that counted beans. It was a joke. I've done accounting all my life. My dad and I used to do like our household expenses since I was 10. You'd write it in the notebook. And so this email would be like our morning report card. How did the different divisions of Google do for ads revenue every day? And to a certain extent, we decided to change. I initially called it bean counters, which annoyed someone. We changed it to financial performance. But my bar is that people react faster to problems than I do. That's what it takes for a company that's like on its A game. Like that things are dissected very, very quickly.
Before it gets to you.
Before I ask the question. I tell people, like, if there are like stability problems, other kinds of issues, my bar is like, I want the person in charge to be telling me before I learn from other means. If I find out something bad about your area from someone else, like, that's not okay.
Right, or from your own intuition.
And so that's sort of the general level of accountability that you want to have. We're getting there. Sometimes I ask questions. Sometimes other people jump in, ask questions. But you also need authority. You need intuition. You need to know what these numbers are like day to day, so you know when something is off. You need to have enough tools at your disposal so you can do like rapid drill downs. So those are the things that fall into place. But for a bunch of these things, I'm also very much a fan of lay down sort of a skeletal system and then like iterate and have structure and muscle and movement. And so these are things that evolve by themselves once you set up that structure of visibility and accountability.
This is a very different scale, but I recently added some folks from different parts of the team under me, and I didn't really know. I had no context on what they were doing. I just had no idea. It's just not my world.
Yeah.
And so I asked them to BCC me on every email that they send. And they said, every email? And I was like, every email. And I'm like, I promise it's not to manage you.
Yeah.
It's legitimately
visibility.
I don't know how else to
100%.
Gain context on your function.
Yep.
Other than going to the lowest level detail that I know to then start putting the pieces together in my head.
Yep.
And they're like, but your inbox. And I'm like, I know.
My problem.
I know. Seems like that's not crazy to you either.
It's not. And so, for example, one of the things that I've written a set of like, hey, here are things I believe in. Here's how I operate. Like my bar, for example, for the exec staff at Snowflake is that, outside of like relative comp and a very few things like, oh, there's a legal problem that should only be between like a very small group of people outside of extraordinary things. everything gets shared with ELT. My exec staff knows everything that I do. Every deck that I look at, I tell people I never make decisions by myself. It's just not something I do. We do these things as
How do they know that?
Because I say so. And so there are email aliases that carry every deck that we review, notes from each one of them. What are the decisions that we reached?
From you?
From me.
That the whole, so you're saying it's bidirectional?
It's bidirectional. So I give you complete visibility into what's going on in my world. But it needs to work the other way also. Where I need to know, like, hey, what are the things you're doing? And so doing this at like every consecutive layer just makes for a team that knows what each other is doing. We also write ELT generally writes these things called snippets. It's an old Google system where it's like a few bullets of, these are the things that I got done last week. These are the things that I have planned. And so my team knows, like, I'm off to Deer Valley tomorrow, or this is what I did in Canada last week. And so I very much believe in like an information culture where information is broadly available. And we very much operate in the mode of, say what we are going to do what we said we would do. And there is like accountability and visibility that builds on itself. I used to say this 100% at Google. I say this here. I'm like, I guarantee you that for the exec staff, I will never make a decision that affects your life without you being there in the meeting. Because I want you to be able to see, and I want you to be able to be a part of this discussion. So we very much operate in a mode also of things like avoid information asymmetry. I get super annoyed when people surprise me with texts. Like, please don't do this. Share those things ahead of time. Let's read them and then have a discussion about what's there, rather than you like someone telling one what's going on. And so to me, these are all like the healthy aspects of how do you have visibility? How do you drive visibility? How do you drive a self-correcting system of accountability?
I think last time I saw you at the KP office when I hosted the CIO group.
That's right.
One observation as you and I were talking in front of the group that the group had after was he's much more intense than I thought he was, because you have kind of a mild-mannered demeanor. But I think underneath that is a deep competitive intensity.
100%. Life's too short.
Yeah. And I can feel that when you describe the way that you manage. This is management. I mean, this is real management. And you know what's funny? I've noticed this in the KP portfolio. Like, this is a feature of high performance companies. However, a lot of the time, it's exhausting for the people in the companies. But the alternative is
mediocrity. It's just shadows.
The company is just okay, yet no one's really being managed. It's very rare to get both of those things together. Where you get someone that's kind of managing and it's a pretty chill workplace, yet you have this exceedingly high performance.
I have no idea how to do that. I just operate in, even in my personal life, like stuff pretty much falls into things I care about. And they get all my time, and stuff that's like, it's okay.
Like what?
And generally, I don't spend much time on, like, it's okay.
What are the things that are in the it's okay bucket that you think other people would spend time on that you discard?
I just mean that, like, from like in my personal life, what are the things I care about? I care about my family. Maximize time with them. I care about being personally, mentally and physically fit. And so I spend a bunch of time, on that. I care about a set of friends. It's not a very large, I'm not the big party person. I care about a set of friends. I spend time to make sure that, like, I'm in touch with them. Outside of that, there's not much else.
And
I'm kind of like, it's good. What food I eat, It's great. I don't really care.
You don't care?
The salad's fine. I'm like completely indifferent to food. I'm completely indifferent to weather, hot, cold. It's fine. I have an umbrella in my backpack.
It just doesn't even cross your mind.
Doesn't cross my mind.
Huh. Do you, is it it's Snowflake today, since you took over, I think is a better run. It's hard to say. I think it's an exceptionally run company right now. However, I really do believe this. The stock price is not going that direction.
That's correct.
Like
aircraft carriers.
What do you mean?
Steering them. It's hard.
It's hard. This is hard work, man. Stock's down almost 50% since you take over, and you're doing literally what I think is all the right things.
That's correct. But it's...
you just have to have some real faith and will.
100%. You have to have that faith. You also have to understand basics, which is that a huge reason why the stock price took a beating is because we went from a high growth company that did mid-30s plus to projecting 22%. And you can quickly plot things like, EV over revenue over growth rate. Like you can come up with approximations for how the markets value stock. And that's a big change in growth rate. Yes, and when we talk about how do we get that to a different place? It's with hard work. It's with like being aligned as a company. It's understanding that driving new product success is like creating new startups. It's hard. And so a lot of what we do, like much tighter alignment. We now have teams that are like engineering plus product plus sales operations plus sales engineers working closely together, because there's no other way to create success with new things. You need that rapid iteration loop. Yes, those heydays will be back. When we are able to confidently say this is what the future looks like, with us being in a high growth environment, we have to earn it. I tell my team this, like, you have to earn your valuations. And so this is all about building enduring success. But building that enduring success takes that sort of, those layers of infrastructure for what does it mean to execute, and what does progress mean at sort of every level of the company and with all of our customers. I think the team is beginning to understand that.
Don't judge the day until the night. I appreciate you doing this.
Thank you.
I really do.
This is a great conversation.
Are you hiring?
Hiring lots of people.
Any key roles that come to mind that you're hiring for?
Well, we are looking for a head of engineering. That's probably the most high-profile role.
Okay.
They get to have an immense amount of influence on a company that will truly be the AI data cloud. By the way, the core hypothesis behind Snowflake is a cloud platform with data at its center is going to realize a significant portion of the growth in cloud infrastructure spending, which is going to go from 400 billion to 2 trillion. And so a lot of what we are doing is, putting all the components that are needed to realize value from data, to realize value from data plus AI, to realize value from applications that are built using our primitives. And so, that's the vision that sort of truly excites me. And our start with analytics, with BI, is just that. It's a start. To me, that's the opportunity in front of us. And, there are going to be other companies, CSPs, Databricks, but it's a very big market. And if you think about it, technology moves to higher levels of abstraction. a huge bulk of the cloud spend today is renting CPUs and renting storage. I joke to people, I want myself a Kubernetes cluster, said no enterprise CIO. They want to do meaningful things with the data that they have. To me, that's like the promise of the world that is coming. And we think we are exceptionally well positioned to do this because unlike, say, the CSPs, but primarily think of the world as a set of independent services with a little bit of integration built in between. They're organized as a bunch of GMs. AWS is a wonderful company, but it's 300 mini companies with a GM each that will sometimes do integration when they really need to. We are one product. We tightly integrate things. And the biggest feedback that we get from our customers is how hassle-free Snowflake is. That's the foundation that we are building on. And that's where I get super excited about what's the opportunity in front of this company and why will it be meaningful. And I think again, the team internally understands that. And yes, while we are going through a rough patch with respect to the stock price, the best way out is to earn a higher price by showing momentum. And a lot of a leader's job is to enunciate the vision for why Snowflake is going to be successful, but accompany it with and here are the things we need to execute on. And people get excited by that. And the nice thing about sort of my, the attention to detail and structure that I bring is I'm not just giving you the vision and saying, details TBD.
You're backing it up.
You're okay, here's what is happening over here. Here's what is happening, in sales. Here's what's happening in sales engineering. This is what product is committing to. And this is how the sum of the parts is larger than, just the individual pieces. And so it's that culture of showing proof all along the way, showing your work all along the way, and being open about what's not working and what will we do to change. That I think, as I said, my aspiration, I'll give you a dumb example. I've told some Snowflake people this. Struggled with weight all my life. About 10 years ago, changed my diet dramatically, dropped 40-ish pounds. Exercise every day, changed my diet massively. But then I tell people, I have a self-correcting system. I don't buy anything other than size 31 pants. And so if my weight begins to creep back, I don't fit. Super annoying. It's a self-correcting system.
I love that. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you. This was fun.
Really fun. Appreciate you.